Before this video begins, in celebration of Doctor Who Season 2, you can use code SEASON2 on my Patreon to get 50% off your first month on any tier on my Patreon page. Let's get into the video. Okay, so it's currently 9:36 on Saturday morning, and I've just finished watching the first episode of Doctor Who Season 2, The Robot Revolution, and I'm halfway through watching Doctor Who Unleashed for that episode. But I thought I'd just quickly jump on and talk about my first impressions of the episode. I'm probably not going to do this for every episode of the season, just ones where I maybe have a chance to or feel like it's worth doing a quick first impressions before I do the review. Part of the reason I'm doing it for this particular episode is I'm not 100% sure when I'll be able to get the review for this episode out, as I'm quite busy next week, so it might not be until like Friday or something like that. So I thought, while I've got a bit of time now after just watching the episode, I thought I'll quickly just go over my first impressions for this episode. So without further ado, let's get into that. So for this episode, I wasn't expecting anything all that great, with it being an opening of the season, an opener, especially with last year's Space Babies, but I was hoping that this would be a bit better than Space Babies as a series opener, but still wasn't expecting too much from it. And I can happily say I think this was definitely better than Space Babies as a season opener. It still wasn't the most interesting story ever, and it wasn't the best story ever, but I was pleasantly surprised by how good it was in comparison to kind of what I expected it to be like for the series opener. Obviously, we get a look at the chemistry between the Doctor and Belinda Chandra, who I think is great in this season. She seems like a great companion. I like the moments that we get to see of her where, even though the Doctor's obviously trying to figure out what's going on with this star certificate and how all this stuff happened with the time fracture and all that, she's just focused on trying to help other people with her nursing skills, people that are injured, like the guy with the dislocated shoulder or whatever it is. It just kind of shows what her priorities are, which is really nice. And obviously we have a bit of a different dynamic between the Doctor and Belinda in this season, with a bit more conflict in that relationship, which I'm going to hopefully talk about later on in this video if I remember. The story itself is fairly interesting. We obviously kind of knew roughly what it was going to be about. After Doctor Who magazine was released, we knew it was going to be about this star being named after Belinda, and then that kind of leading to her being the queen of this planet, and the robots come in to take her away and bring her to the planet. And I think we also knew about that she was meant to be getting married on this planet as well. I know it was kind of meant to be a twist that the AI generator was Alan Budd, I think his name is. For me, I kind of saw that coming. I kind of expected it to be that. I didn't quite know how it was going to work until we had the whole time fracture thing with the time dilation and stuff like that going on. But before this episode aired, I did expect that Alan Budd was going to be the AI generator. I think I might have seen someone kind of theorize that on Twitter or something like that, and then since then I kind of thought, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So with it being like a twist, I guess it didn't really work as a twist for me because I was kind of expecting it, but it was still like a nice kind of addition to the story, and it made sense for the story. Obviously as well, this whole thing with the time fracture does mean that the Doctor has been on this planet for 6 months, which obviously leads to him having this kind of relationship with, I think her name is Sasha 55. Obviously it does kind of make sense that if he's been kind of with her for 6 months on this planet, that he does obviously have a really strong connection with her. But I do feel like those emotional moments are focused on a bit too heavily to say that we've kind of only seen her for a couple of minutes at this point. And obviously a lot of people already have issues with the Doctor crying all the time anyway. I don't personally have issues with the Doctor crying, but when it is every episode, it does kind of lose impact when it happens in other episodes. So having this kind of forced moment of the Doctor crying over someone we barely know, but obviously he knows quite well, it does feel a little bit weird and a little bit forced. But at least it doesn't happen too many times. It's mostly just the one time where he's properly crying over it, and then a couple of moments where she's mentioned again later on in the episodes. But I do feel like it was maybe focused on a little bit too much to say we don't really know who she is. One thing I do appreciate is how quickly the main story kind of gets wrapped up, because obviously with it being a season opener, the plot itself isn't really the most interesting part of the episode. It's obviously the characters and being introduced to the new companion and the companion Doctor dynamic. So I appreciate how quickly that story was kind of wrapped up, and it leads to a lot of extra time after the main story is wrapped up for us to be in the TARDIS, getting to see more of the dynamic between the Doctor and Belinda, where we have a moment where obviously the fact that Varada Sethu has previously been in the show as Mundy Flynn before is kind of drawn attention to, which for me personally, I'm not a big fan of that being drawn attention to, because it does seem like we're going to get more of that in this season, more more explanations as to how they're connected and if this is actually a coincidence or not and stuff like that. And obviously with all the stuff with Ruby last season, I don't know how well it's going to be executed when it gets around to that point where it's revealed later on in the season. But with all that being said, this moment does lead to a great moment between the Doctor and Belinda, with Belinda obviously kind of not really liking the Doctor because she just wants to get home, and this kind of add into that conflict because the Doctor has kind of scanned her DNA without her consent. So I like that that's giving a reason to have some kind of conflict between the Doctor and companion in this season, which is obviously a nice change from the Doctor and Ruby last season, where she was just totally on board to be traveling with the Doctor and going on these adventures. I do feel like there were a couple other things I was going to mention in this video, but like I said, this is just my quick first impressions of this episode. I don't have any notes written down in front of me to try and remember these things for this particular video. So any things that I haven't mentioned that I was going to mention, I'll obviously bring up when I do my review. But let me know what you think about this episode in the comments down below, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see those future reviews for Doctor Who Season 2. And before this video ends as well, I'd also like to mention that in celebration of Doctor Who Season 2 airing, I have currently got an offer on my Patreon where you can get 50% off any tier for the first month if you use code Season2 when starting your membership on my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/JoeyUnderwood. So if that's something you'd be interested in, I'll make sure to have it linked in the description down below. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for my review later on in the week.